So I'm going to do a little intro, and then, So Spot the Difference, this was an album released by the British rock band Squeeze in 2010. So you've got to understand, the next hour is going to be a lot of talk about the band Squeeze. The album contained strict re-recordings of what are elsewhere called greatest hits, all but one of the tracks from a compilation from 1982 called Singles 45s and Under. That one, which some of you may well have had in your collection, with 3 other tracks. And the handout, as we go through, we'll be referring to this. So the handout just shows you the tracks that were contained on Spot the Difference and the original album. There are many reasons why music might be strictly re-recorded. The reason this album was made was explicitly concerned with the reclamation of rights. Founding member Glenn Tilbrook made this clear in a paper issued at the time of release. Is it better with the microphone? Worse with the mic? Better with it? Yeah. So, Glenn Tilbrook, a couple of quotes from him. To think that we could now actually earn something decent from the use of our songs in TV ads or movies is refreshing. And the idea that we can actually know when they're going to be used and even have a tiny degree of control is delightful. Would we undercut Universal on price? Absolutely. This is an invitation to ad agencies and music supervisors around the world. We're open for business. Next one, we can't own the original recordings, but we can own flawless re-recordings that are the next best thing. We're fortunate in that our songs have outlived both the original recordings and the restriction on re-recording them, and that we were financially able to have another go. Most bands don't get that lucky. So that's background to why this record was made in 2010. As for our involvement in and approach to this project, the Popular Music Research Unit at Oxford Brookes, founded in 2009, had explored a number of connections between music and publishing, had sponsored a study day looking specifically at rights in the context of the film Anyone Can Play Guitar, a film about the Oxford rock music scene made by John Spearer and Hank Stars in 2010. So 3 of us are going to talk about this record. A 4th member of the team, Joe Turner, has contributed to Jan's paper. Jennifer Skellington starts by looking at the album's nature with a focus on a particular song line. I'll discuss issues in the musical work and Squeeze as a band. And then Jan Butler looks at some of the issues arising from the qualities of recording. Coincidentally, all 3 papers will make mention of the track Tempted, if you happen to know that one. So, we're going to kick off with a little game first.
So, can you spot the difference? These are different versions of the first track of Spot the Difference and Nail My Heart. I want you to just vote with a simple show of hands which is the original and which is not. So I'll just play them both and then I'll say, let's click on the original, do the original. Here we go. and even split in the room. Okay, track 1 is in fact the original, so well done to you guys. But they are very close, it is very difficult to tell. So I'll hand over to Jennifer, who's going to tell you more about the copyright aspect of the project.
Okay, good morning everyone, thanks for coming along. As Dai has already said, I'm going to kick off by talking about song life stories and rights migrations, rights histories in relation to Spot the Difference. So beginning with an imagined endpoint, can you hear me okay? Good, okay. Beginning with this imagined endpoint then, in the final chapter of the 2004 book, Squeeze Song by Song, Glenn Tilbrook tells us this. He says, I've always believed that the moment money starts dictating to anybody what they do and how they approach their work, then that's the kiss of death. I find the thought of a bunch of grumpy old blokes like us getting together on an 80s revival tour awful. And in the same book, Chris Difford tells Drury that he too has resigned himself to the fact that Squeeze have probably played their last gig. And so I had to smile to myself as I stood in the front row at Cornbury Music Festival a couple of months ago. To witness these two self-labelled grumpy old blokes apparently enjoying something of a revival tour. And Cornbury was just one of several live appearances that they've made this year. In July, they appeared at they performed for a charitable street gig in Rupert Street, London. They played on the main stage at the Barclaycard British Summertime Festival in Hyde Park, and they also released their 16th album, The Knowledge, less than a year ago, last October. It's possible, of course, this new lease of life might be motivated by money, at least in part, as Difford admitted in 2004 that for him at least, quote, touring mostly pays the bills, both with Squeeze and as a solo performer, and that his recording income had at that point largely dried up as sales had declined over the past decade. So how did Difford and Tilbrook move from those relatively pessimistic and cautious comments in 2004 to their recent renaissance? Well, my money is on their 2010 Spot the Difference album, for reasons which I'll explain, starting with a quick detour into money and ethics. In 2004, Tilbrook stated that he might be open to working with Chris again on new projects, so long as they had artistic credibility. And in the same book, Difford suggested that getting back with Tilbrook might be possible if a project came up which he believed in. So we might assume, therefore, that the Spot the Difference project ticked all of the necessary boxes for both men. Dai has already outlined the basis for the Spot the Difference project, and we'll most likely never know whether Difford and Tilbrook have ever actually sat down and calculated exactly how much money they've lost as a result of putting pen to paper on their original contract with Miles Copeland. But they're clearly both aware of the financial implications, both for themselves and for their families, as Chris stated in this article. And I'll read some of this, actually. He says, our original contract, drawn up by Miles Copeland, our first manager, signed away the rights to all our songs, masters and copyright, never to be returned. His company owned 50% of my words and Glenn's melodies for life. Everything in his contract was cross-collateralised, which is illegal now. So if we didn't make any money from the touring but did from the publishing, one would pay for the other. Copeland knew we'd signed it because we'd be young, we didn't know any lawyers, and he was promising us £15 a week, which seemed a great deal at the time. Skip a bit. I'd like our songs back, but it's never going to happen. The masters will be owned by Universal for the rest of my life. The publishing is with BMG Rights Management, and they won't even talk about readjusting our share more evenly. It's sad because my kids will never benefit from my songs. And Tilbrook has expressed a similar sense of injustice, and I haven't got this one on the slide, but he said, if one of my children was doing a life sentence in prison for a crime I knew they hadn't committed, I would do my best to get them out, no matter what. Having the recordings of my songs owned by someone else with no chance of getting them back is a little bit like that. So re-recording them is, thanks to a contractual loophole, a little bit like breaking that proverbial child out of prison. Those songs are free now and back where they belong, i.e. thanks to Spot the Difference. As a side note here, we know that in 2013, several US artists, including Village People, the Eagles, Huey Lewis and the News and Fleetwood Mac, began activating the arcane section 203 in US law, which allows authors to reclaim rights to their work after 35 years. with the clock starting at the 1st of January 1978. And whilst this comes slightly after Spot the Difference and it's kind of across the pond, it does perhaps mirror Tilbrook's sentiments around copyright and ethics. So, what exactly happened to the rights to their songs after their fateful handing over to Copeland? To answer this question, I've been building up song life stories for each of the tracks on Spot the Difference, and these have become quite lengthy, and I haven't got time to run through all of them today. So, as Dai said, I'm going to focus on Tempted as my case study. I've been using discogs.com for much of my research, largely due to the size of the database, but most of the details have also been cross-referenced with copies of the recordings themselves, which have been purchased by Oxford Brookes University and squeezed into our university music collection. So I want to use this rough idea of a clock to count down events over the 29-year period between the initial release of Tempted through to the song's reappearance on Spot the Difference. And I'm going to start by outlining all of the Squeeze recordings which feature Tempted, and please bear with me as I run through all of these. So, Tempted first appears on Squeeze's fourth studio album, East Side Story, released on 15th May 1981. According to discogs.com, 35 versions of this particular album exist, spanning various countries. As with many of their other albums, subsequent versions appear. For example, in this case, there's a 1998 special edition gold CD version released in the US and Canada. In 2007, there's a remastered mini LP sleeve version released in Japan. And in 2008, a CD reissue of the album was released in the US. 2 months after its appearance on East Side Story, Tempted was released as a 7-inch vinyl single. And in addition to the 7-inch, in the same year, there's a 12-inch promo version of Tempted released in the US. The following year, 1982, saw the UK cassette and vinyl release of Squeeze singles 45s and Under. This is the album, actually, that was to later provide the blueprint for Spot the Difference. It marked the band's breakup at the end of 1982, but it also became Squeeze's best-selling LP of all time, according to Chris Difford. From 1984 onwards, there's many re-releases of this album. In fact, according to Discogs, a staggering 60 versions exist. Almost all of these are on the A&M label. I've not attempted to fit them all in here, but for example, there's a UK CD re-release in 1984, and at least 11 US and Canadian re-releases between 1986 and 2006. Interestingly, the 2004 Canadian version is given the alternative name of The Best of Squeeze, and there's a sheet music songbook to accompany the album too, published in 1994. So as the CD format began to take hold in the mid-80s, various Squeeze compilations began to emerge. In 1987, there's Squeeze Classics Volume 25. This is a US CD marking the 25th anniversary of A&M Records. In 1992, the song appears on Squeeze Greatest Hits. And in 1993, Squeeze remixed and overdubbed the original recording to create a new version of the song for the soundtrack to the film Reality Bites. This version received some radio airplay and was dubbed Tempted 94. In 1996, the song is included on the CD compilation Excess Moderation, and a digitally remastered version of the song appears on the US CD, the Piccadilly Collection. In 1997, the song is included on 6 of 1. This is a UK-only 6 CD box set, which included the band's first 6 studio albums, each digitally remastered. And in the same year, in 1997, a remastered version of East Side Story appears, and in 1998, Tempted is included on the Squeeze Master Series album. In 2002, the song appears on the Big Squeeze compilation album, and in 2004, Ian Drury publishes his book, Squeeze Song by Song, which includes the song lyrics to Tempted. In 2005, the song appears on Gold. This is the retitled North American issue of the Big Squeeze, and in 2006, Tempted appears on the Squeeze Story. A year later, the song is included on the Essential Squeeze compilation CD. And then finally, Squeeze go full circle and release Spot the Difference, with the sound recording and phonographic rights assigned to Love Records Limited. Okay, so on to the rights then. In the vast majority of these recordings, the rights to the musical work belong to A&M Records. There are some exceptions though. For example, the 1998 special edition CD version of East Side Story was released on the Mobile Fidelity Sound Lab label under license from Polymedia. And the 2007 remastered Japanese version was released on the Strange Days record label. And the 2008 US CD reissue was released on the American Beat Records label. Tempted 94 was released on RCA Records, with copyright for this version resting with Universal City Studios. And the 2004 Canadian version of 45s and Under was released on the Universal Music label. A&M Records, formed in 1962, was acquired by Polygram in 1989, which itself was later acquired by Seagram and dissolved into the Universal Music Group in 1998, hence Universal's name popping up towards the end of this song's life story, in respect of The Big Squeeze, Gold and Essential Squeeze. The life story of the sound recordings for the song is a little more colourful, simply because sometimes additional new rights are created for new compilations, for example for BMG Music in relation to Tempted 94, and for Polygram International Music in relation to the Squeeze Master Series album. The compilation albums often show the rights of the compilation itself alongside the original rights, presumably because they've gone back to the original master. For example, on The Big Squeeze, phonographic recording rights are assigned to a division of Universal Music Operations Limited, but phonographic copyright for the song is also shown as A&M Records 1981. With regards to the trail of publishing rights, illegal music were the original publishers of this song back in 1981, with Miles Copeland serving as its director, and we can see the publishing rights linked to this company on the 7-inch vinyl single, the 1982 East Side Story album, and the 45s and Under LP. The 12-inch promo version shows the publishing rights belonging to illegal songs, presumably linked to illegal music. The company renamed itself in 1998 and continued trading under the name of Bugle Songs Limited, which explains the publisher's name found in the 1994 Squeeze single songbook. The music publisher cited on my personal copy of 45s and Under, whose year of release is stated as unknown on Dancecult, is Deptford's Songs. I'm guessing it's around the early 80s. And this is most likely an incarnation of Deptford Fun City Records, which is a name which Difford actually invented. The basis for a sub-label of illegal records set up in 1977 by Miles Copeland, but it was nevertheless defunct by 1980. In the 2004 book, Squeeze Song by Song, the lyrics attempted are reproduced by kind permission of EMI Music Publishing. And likewise, the same publisher is cited on the 2007 Essential Squeeze album. Quite how the rights got from Bugle to EMI, I'm not quite sure yet. Indeed, sometimes these shifts in ownership have produced some unexpected results, such as when Rondell acquired Jadebury and discovered 31 previously unrecorded different deliberate compositions. Jadebury Music, by the way, had originally held the copyright to 6 of the other tracks on Spot the Difference. But putting Tempted aside for a moment, in his interview back with us back in March, Chris Difford told us that even at the very beginning of Squeeze's career, there were 2 publishers. There was Jadebury, which was bought by Rondell, and then there was Rondell, who covered just their B-sides, plus Annie Get Your Gun, which was really confusing. And he summed this up really nicely for us, saying, it's a really complicated kettle of fish, this, because there's so many different publishing deals, so many different copyright deals, it's a real mess. It's also fair to say that another reason Tempted may have endured the test of time might have something to do with its appearance in TV commercials. Here's the ones I found so far. Some of them are difficult to date, but we know, for example, that it was used in a US Burger King advert around 2000 and a Gap Jeans advert sometime before June 2008. The song appeared in a US Fruits of the Loom underwear advert around 2003 and also appeared in adverts for Heineken, Dentine Tango and featured in the video game Grand Theft Auto Vice City 2002. So far, though, the Spot the Difference version of Tempted hasn't been exploited commercially. The song has a strong history of cover versions too, but I've no time to run through all of those today, that's a paper for another time. But it's fair to say that the song has had an interesting life of its own, well beyond its original release. So, what can we learn from all of this? Well, if nothing else, the exercise has highlighted to me that the extremely complex task which long-term career musicians can face in terms of keeping track of the different rights to their songs. What we're seeing here is the migration of rights across different record labels and publishers as businesses change hands and rename themselves across a lengthy period, 40 years or so in fact, in the case of some of the older tracks on the album. My uncovering of the history of Tempted so far has shown that the rights are indeed a long way away from Difford and Tilbrook, seemingly destined never to return. But Tilbrook has now freed his wrongly incarcerated child, so to speak, and as we heard in Dai's introduction, he's expressed his excitement about the potential to now undercut Universal and profit from Squeeze's older songs. But there's a catch, as Difford explained to us when we interviewed him.
If I'm making a film and I want another nail in my heart, I'll probably go for the original, and I probably wouldn't know the sort of differences out there because we don't have somebody representing us in that field. And by the time they reach Universal and then they send us the information, it's too late for us to say, well, by the way, we'll give you a cheaper version. So, because we don't have the right to do that. So, we're kind of cornered.
So they're kind of cornered. In evaluating Spot the Difference in his interview, Difford did also use this wonderful analogy of an original Morris Minor versus a stripped down and rebuilt version, and said that rather like these songs, the original is priceless. And if any of you have read Difford's autobiography, you know that he loves his cars, so we like that analogy. So without employing someone to give Spot the Difference a big marketing push through the various sinking places, the album seems unlikely, in the short term at least, to challenge the original releases in terms of commercial usage. But the album's co-producer Andrew J. Jones suggested to us that the project most likely enabled the duo to reconnect at least, and paved the way perhaps for their string of live performances since 2010, including those which I mentioned earlier. So when spotting the differences between the original releases and the 2010 re-recordings, we can also be mindful of the shifting interpersonal and creative dynamic between Difford and Tilbrook themselves. And so to conclude, the act of signing away their rights most certainly helped establish Squeeze in their early years, and both men acknowledged the important role which Copeland played in launching the group at their outset. But in this neat kind of final twist, the resentment which this caused, especially on Tilbrook's part, has also played its role in pulling the duo back together as the motivation behind Spot the Difference, to fuel their now extended careers and the Squeeze brand. Thank you.
So,
Can I ask a question at this point, or do you want to go right at the end?
Just maybe at the end.
is it like point of info type of thing?
Well, just in terms of, you didn't tell us, I don't think, which publisher owns the song copyrights on the re-recording.
Oh, that was Love Records. Yes, Love Records.
No, the song copyright, the publisher.
Oh, there's Oxford.
Is it still EMI, or did the band get the song copyright back as well?
It's a separate thing, so
I know it's a separate thing, but
would just be the same. So it wouldn't change through the re-recordings, and so it'd be the same publishers.
Yeah, so
We assume.
No, it wouldn't be.
It's BNG
That's what you might.
Well, unless the band made an effort to.
It's
Yeah,
a separate legal issue. That's
they haven't got the rights. They haven't got the song rights back. The only
Okay.
thing they managed to claim is the
Just wanted to clarify.
That's right, yeah. We're meeting Christopher's brother Lew Difford, who's always kept an eye on the band's legal machinations shortly, so these questions will be pressing on some of those critical issues. Oh, by the way, so you know what the whole thing's about. If you've had enough Squeeze, by all means, you know, you're free to go. Right. Now then, when, in the sleeve notes to Spot the Difference, Chris Difford says this: ownership is king when you're an artist. And I think what he means is that ownership of work ultimately belongs to the artist and not to anyone else. So ownership is something that, as we've seen, migrates and can be taken away from you. But when you're an artist, the ultimate owner, the king, is the artist. We remember Brahms, and we listen to the Third Symphony from 1884. We don't remember Simrock, who first published it, even though Simrock was like a colossus among music publishers. Ownership is king when you're an artist. And so Difford, I think, there is trying to claim a kind of a loftier, a higher ground. And I think music theory, probably in its worst version, music theory does that. It kind of detaches itself from some of that dirt. And of course, in musicology, the study of popular music, you've got to keep those things in mind. But I'm coming at this, at the musical work, as somebody with roots, at least, in music theory. And it seems to me that if in the end, Spot the Difference is motivated by ownership of musical rights, then the question is, to what extent were Squeeze authors of original works? That seems to me the question it comes back to, but that's very debatable. And it seems to me that Spot the Difference, as usual, contains a mixture of original and derivative works that tend, both at their time and in the present, towards originality and ones that tend towards imitation. And this is a very, very blunt diagram, which I've just made up to sum up where I think, this kind of continuum works its way out. I'm not for a moment positing originality as a virtue, which is a very small, romantic, modernist claim. But I think that's... And the other thing is, that even the case I'm going to play you now, Loving You Tonight, it would only take, let's say, finding out that Whitney Houston's last demo was of Loving You Tonight, and the history of something can change overnight. But I do claim that at one end of this album is Loving You Tonight, and I'll play you a little bit of it, and it seems to me that this is tending towards being an imitative work. This is how it goes. I don't want to play the whole track and just play a clip.
I said I'm feeling blown, ills and fears. Nothing in my life makes sense. Question mark forward, still the stars up above. 'Cause I'm coming home to one that I love. Sometimes I can't see the trees for the wood. Loving you tonight feels good. Loving you tonight feels good.
And the track could be compared deliberately, provocatively, to a track like It's So Blue, which was recorded by Paul Carrack with Jules Holland and his Rhythm and Blues Orchestra and Friends, one of very many recordings that Jules Holland issued.
All alone in the heat of the afternoon, on the sheets in your room. It's so blue this afternoon. I'll come to you.
On the other hand, I suggest that Squeeze made 3 claims to originality identifiably. Christopher's words, especially in the early works, Tilbrook's whole approach to harmony, chords, and in a small but distinctive performative detail, the doubling of the vocal line, the octave. And in that all 3 aspects contain only in Difford and Tilbrook, then the claim to originality resides with them. That picture really does kind of sum it up. Jules Holland pushed into the background. And again, this is not to claim that the musicians were the tremendous musicians, Jules Holland, Gilson Davis, the drummer, fantastic producers, but I don't think they make a sustained claim to originality. The double vocal octave, to get this out of the way quickly, is a coincidence, but no less distinctive than that, and one that's used strategically. Sometimes it covers a whole track, sometimes it appears almost like a self-reference during the track. Here's an example. Here's my favourite, which isn't from Spot the Difference. This is In Quintessence, the first track on East Side Story. And there's the examples from Spot the Difference. Reference there Now I think that could be compared, the great precedent for it, funny enough, is I think the British comic duo Flanders and Swan, which you have like double vocal octave, but with these very distinct vocal characters.
Davis was no ignoramus, and sang her this sweet serenade. Month, glorious month, nothing quite like it for cooling the blood. So follow, down through the hollow, and...
Okay, that's the double octave. Coming to the words, like Bernie Taupin, Chris Gifford was a lyricist who supplied words to be set by composer Tilbrook. And in the early Squeeze Difford's words created a particular poetic world, as I've called it, largely by subject matter, but also by a sustained use of the pararhyme, the half-rhyme. Of the Spot the Difference tracks, Slap and Tickle is its most sustained illustration. But this combination underlies highly distinctive passages such as the openings of Up the Junction and Cool for Cats. Once Squeeze were established, I claim that particular claim to originality recedes. It's a long story. The bridge section of Up the Junction shows both this point about the words and the point I'm going to make about Tilbrook and harmony. So I'll just play you the bridge section of Up the Junction. I think this is the original recording, I'm not sure. I think it's Cool for Cat. So you can tell the subject matter, even from that clip, the sort of Squeeze world. But different half rhymes also creates a sense of something not quite right. Winter to bitter, tenor, better, ready, telly, fire inside. And that's a real feature of early Squeeze. In the same section, then, Tilbrook is inventing a passage of harmonic engineering to reach a key a tone below the home key. It's got from E down to D, and then it whacks back up again. The elevating modulation. But there's also that chromatic element, starting from the kind of E world, the sharp world of E, there's a shift over to the flat world of F, and at the middle is that minor third shift, B minor to D minor. Hardcore fanatics might compare that to a track like F Hole from East Side Story or House of Love from Play. Again, Tilbrook, coming to him, describes an imaginary compilation of Squeeze tracks entitled A Fistful of Chords, and his attention focuses on melody from his voice and harmony, with an inevitable attention to voice leading the outer parts. However, Tilbrook is clearly focused on harmonic exploration. It's interesting that as a cover artist out on YouTube, Tilbrook chooses to perform Friday on My Mind by the Easy Beats, 1966, the most harmonically daring of all pop hits. By the way, small point, he's also the most punctilious of guitar soloists, small point there. But as a claim to originality, Tempted first appeared on East Side Story, 1981, produced Elvis Costello and Roger Kilian. This was one of the times when Jules Holland had left the group, replaced by Paul Carrick, who sang the lead vocal on this track and is brought back to do the same track on Spot the Difference. I have two things to say about Tempted. First, that it's a compelling harmonic excursion, and second, I want to talk about the Spot the Difference version in relation to performance. I'm not going to do, for reasons of time, I won't do the former point, covered to some extent by that discussion of the junction. And I have a lot more to say about Tilbrook and Harmony anyway, in general, but move on. In a sentence, Tempted is a piece of music that constantly evades the strong tonic cadence through two things. One is the tonic mixture, so B minor for B major, and lots of plagal, so going from B to E to A, that sort of thing, going down that subdominant path. Those two things. But this run of excerpts will show the track developing across performances and ending in Spot the Difference. So I'm going down the route of relationship between recording and live performance. The track has actually been issued in two demo versions, one by Tilbrook with piano and backing vocals, and one as Squeeze, the latter described by Glenn Tilbrook as the Electric Light Orchestra on a bad day. The Tilbrook demo, everything's there. The chords, the inversions, the voice theme, it's all there. And little differences were included across the two demos to reach the version on East Side Story. However, between the East Side Story recording and Spot the Difference, Tempted was performed in concert dozens, if not hundreds of times. Here's one of the crux issues of Spot the Difference: whether to acknowledge those very many performances or turn back to the original recording. And the answer is very much the latter. The performances alter from recording to live performances, especially at the coda. There's some amazing endings on, like, television performances on YouTube, check them out. But a little detail of the third verse supplies a brief illustration. While the first verse had the job of presenting the melody, the second verse in the East Side Story recording played with voices. There's a passage of Elvis Costello pretending he's in the Temptations in the second verse. The third verse then, in the East Side Story original, returns to the first verse melody. So here's the original of the third verse of Tempted. Now, already on the 1990 live recording issued as Around and About, the key moments of change are in place. It's at this third verse that Tilbrook begins improvising, gaining a higher note in series. So you start with da-da, up to that higher note. The coda then kind of goes to church, already in this live version. Here's just that bit we've heard. Many versions of that available. By the time then Paul Carrick came to do this thing called Tempted 94 for a soundtrack of Reality Bites, Paul Carrick is putting in some of this improvised melody into his third verse. the Spot the Difference version, finally, of this passage, and the strangeness of the project becomes apparent. It's something we talked about to the producer, Andrew Jones, of the album quite a lot. It's as though the song has been put back in this bit of melody has been put back in a cage which the live performances had escaped from. So this one. Oh, Carol again.
I bought a novel, some perfume, a fortune all for you, but it's not my caution that needs to be untrue. I asked my reflection, tell me what he said to do.
Okay. Now, what's that one I doing on time?
Fine.
Yeah. Okay. I took two more, so that's about 10 to two general points, won't take too long. One about compilations and one about genre. The point about compilations are important ideas in general. Playlists are important ideas. Publications like the selected or collected poems of Auden or Larkin tell their own stories of inclusion and, importantly, exclusion, what's left out. A compelling alternative to Spot the Difference or the various greatest hits is the one called, you saw it briefly, Excess Moderation, 1996, 40 squeeze tracks, untrammelled by success and chosen for different reasons. The question that haunts Spot the Difference is this: of the album's 14 tracks, why were 11 found on that compilation in 1982, with only 3 others added between 82 and 2010? Putting it quantitatively, the 62 tracks on the band's first 5 albums had an 18% chance of appearing on Spot the Difference, while the 93 tracks on the 8 albums between 82 and 2010 had just over 3% chance. Spot the Difference confirms the band with several durable songs, durable the word, in its first 4 years, followed by a prolonged and surely dispirited dearth, live performances as greatest hits sessions with occasional new tracks included. But my further point would be that compilations are just a choice based on a set of principles. And if you change the principles, you might change the tracks. So, Spot the Difference is, and to put it annoyingly, is also about what's not on Spot the Difference. Now, the second point I want to make is about genre. Now, genre does seem a way, blunt but useful, of summarising a body of work in its generality and specificity. And the problem with Squeeze, famously in some ways, is that they never fitted easily into the subgenre. Rock music for sure, new wave ? Power pop ? Difford used to prefer being called a pop group in an idea of pop music that include the Hollies and the Kinks. But my sense of it is that there was a type of British rock music in the 70s that could extend to include Squeeze, and that was pub rock. Now, it's a lousy title, and genre does depend on nomenclature, on the efficacy of the word. Pub rock has none of the dynamism of its 2 great 70s Brit rock neighbours, progressive and punk, none of the visual and connotative power of metal and glam, and still none of the plodding, hyphenated efficiency of folk rock and jazz rock. I don't have a better term, by the way, but I think there was a distinct line of British 70s rock that fell outside the established subgenres. Assuming the list starts with Will Birch's great history, Brinsley Schwartz, Ian Dury, possibly Dr. Feelgood, Ace, which included Paul Carrack and Graham Parker, then the list would then including piano, Joe Jackson, Boomtown Rats, Elvis Costello, and Attractions and Squeeze, as well as without pianos, Dire Straits, The Police, and The Pretenders. It became a genre very much worth being part of. And defining this non-existent genre would depend on 4 things, I think. One is being haunted by following the Beatles post-Revolver. Secondly, taking bearings from American country music and American soul music. Thirdly, and most importantly, being competent musicians in a particular way, distinct from prog and punk. And finally, an important subset of the last one is that the bands often included piano or keyboard. And oddly enough, there really were pianos in pubs. It's in the bar that the piano man finds another nail in my heart. However, as naive proof for the attractions, the piano proves to be a problem for Squeeze. So there's a little music history diversion. Concluding, I have 2 or 3 things to say, but we've got a general conclusion to come. One is that, from the perspective of kind of critical music theory, Squeeze had a strong claim to originality that goes well beyond the confines of Spot the Difference. Spot the Difference is unusual in resisting the opportunity to reflect intervening concert performance. And as a pub rock band with great pop acumen but also a progressive tendency, they fall between cracks, which might also explain Spot the Difference's heartland as far as 35 years before its release. So thank you very much. That's what I came to say. Over to Jan. More tempting.
Too many clips on, but we shall see how we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about reproduction, re-recording, and reimagining of historic tracks. So we heard from Dai just now about what might make Squeeze original songwriters. I'm going to follow on from that here to discuss what might seem to be original elements of Squeeze's production style. Then I'm going to cover what this meant for making the Spot the Difference album, before outlining briefly the work I've carried out with the help of my research assistant Joe Turner, literally spotting the difference between different versions and discussing what this suggests in general. So, we know from our research that Glenn Tilbrook was heavily involved in the production of Squeeze tracks from the start of their career, unlike Chris Tickford. Many of Squeeze's early tracks became very electronic in the studio, which is initially just for pragmatic reasons. So Take Me I'm Yours, which was their first single of their first album, had a backing track created using synthesizers because John Cale was off sick that day. They needed to continue working in the studio without him. The band had to be taught how to use the equipment on that occasion, but they kept going and included electronic in their work, particularly on the second album. Difford in particular was uncomfortable with this change in direction at first, but as this use of electronics then became part of the signature sound of the early Squeeze records, he reckons that in retrospect it helped them stand out from the crowd and was a good thing. So there are 3 aspects of Squeeze's signature sound which developed over the first few records after Take Me I'm Yours, which could be considered to form a key part of the production style of the band, which is very noticeable on Spot the Difference. The first element was the use of interesting combinations of instruments, which you might say all bands do, but Squeeze have particular ones. Most often these are the inclusion of multiple keyboard instruments or synthesizers which play complementary parts, but they also use merged combinations of other instruments playing in unison, or sometimes use electronic means to create composite sounds or simulate double-tracked vocals. So this instrumental or electronic doubling could be considered the instrumental or production equivalent of the double-octave voices that was a part of their singing style. So I've just shown you a couple of examples. So we've already heard the opening to Another Nail in My Heart several times now, and that blends unison guitar and bass, which is exactly matching with an opening marimba that goes bing, bing. So I'll just play that all the time. So on. Is That Love is another good example where it has bass and piano playing in unison and then added a honky-tonk sound later. So this gives the bass an unusual sound which is particularly thick later in this extract. This is in the bridge.
Pick me up with your letters, your walk around notes. Funny how you still find me right here at home. Let's up with a book and a drink.
And that's all made denser in that bridge section. And finally, another good example is Black Coffee in Bed, which has got piano and organ in unison throughout. And then it adds the bass joins in as well. and the CR68 Roland drum machine, but they sometimes also added other elements such as the famous bottle setup, which is used in Goodbye Girl, and they use the maroons every so often in the Mail, My Heart and Tempted. So this is the opening of Goodbye Girl. This is from the single version, and this distinction will be reported in minutes. Here we go. So you can hear the drum machine, and then there's this kind of plink, plink, plink sound, which is some bottles on strings that they pan across the speakers. So it's a very busy percussion track made of different elements. The final and perhaps most common aspect of the signature sound the only used to squeeze was the use of extreme panning and phasing effects. So in the Goodbye Girl clip I just played, for example, you may or may not be able to hear, because I actually can't really hear what the speakers at all from here, that the bottles are panned hard left and right. Could you hear that at all? Anybody stick in the middle? Yes, excellent. I've got some pictures so you can see the panning, even if you can't hear it later. But this becomes a distinct. So like double octave voices, these moments of extreme panning are occasionally used throughout a track, particularly often on the Cool for Cats album tracks, which has panned whooshing, which goes from speaker to speaker throughout quite a lot of the tracks, but are more often used to delineate song sections and create contrast throughout the song. New sections are often marked by panning tricks in my list based on the difference. So Take Down Yours has panning in the opening and outro, which disappears in the middle. Cool for Cats used it to label solo and outro sections. Tempted has it at various structural points that we'll come to later. Quite often it's one part, so it's the drums that are panned across to mark the beginning of the solo, or sometimes it's guitar which is panned across to mark the beginning of the solo, which happens as often to call pulling whistles from the shell. I'm sure it happens in other squeeze tracks, but I've been focusing on the Spot the Difference track for my analysis here. These panning details are almost all beautifully replicated in Spot the Difference, and in the later tracks which are included on the album, which are less faithful to the original versions, some new extreme panning is added. This can be clearly heard in the Spot the Difference version of Black Coffee in Bed, where there are some panning tricks in the drum fills towards the end which weren't present in the original. So Spot the Difference to some extent has developed its own panning aesthetic based on this technique of squeezes. So the techniques used in the originals bleed over into the reimagined later tracks, which gives Spot the Difference a more coherent production style than other compilations of squeeze, which if you listen to them tend to have sudden jumps in the panning, which is quite distracting. So, how was Spot the Difference made? From the start, it was an attempt, as Dai said, at perfect recreation of the original tracks. Then Tilbrook did proof of concept using Goodbye Girl prior to the album project being carried forward with co-producer Andy Jones. The Goodbye Girl track highlights some of the weirdnesses of the project, so it's worth discussing here. So Goodbye Girl exists in, these are all the recordings that I've analysed on the computer. It exists in at least two different versions, so the single and the album track. There are musical differences, which I'll talk about in a minute, but you can see the single is 3 minutes 10 to start with, this on vinyl. By Spot the Difference, it's only 3 minutes long. So there are various versions. There's about 5 seconds difference between the album version and the single version, basically, because of various musical differences. So these are the differences summarised. Goodbye Girl's single version. The opening is the one we just heard. It has a long pan note which goes from left to right over a drum machine beat with the bottle setup percussion, which is panned wide to left and right, and a moving shaker that moves across the space. The album version, in contrast, has no panned opening note, no strong drum machine beat. It just has the bottle setup, percussion and shaker, which are panned wide but they're fixed so the shaker doesn't move across the pace. So I'm just going to play those so you can hear the differences. This is the version we just heard. Again. And you hear there's no automatic doubling on the vocals there as well. This is the album version. In verse 2 but are not panned. In the album version, the real drums enter in verse 2 but are panned across the space. And in the outro, there's various musical differences which I won't go into now. Lyrically, there are also differences. In the single version, he's lost a silver razor, he's got money in his waistcoat, and his wife's moved to Jersey. But in the album version, he's lost a blue dress book, so he's in a fur coat, and his wife's moved to Guernsey. He also meets them at different locations in the first line as a ballroom or a pool room, which I noticed after reading last night. So, there's the lyrical differences as well. So, Spot the Differences, Goodbye Girl kind of amalgamates both of these versions to make something that's reminiscent but not quite the same as either of them. This is what it sounds like. Including the wide pan bottle setup. There's no ADT on the vocals as in the single, but it uses the album lyrics and it goes back to the single outro. The other thing you might notice from that is that the keyboards don't sound quite right. It's on the giveaways and Spot the Difference, which I'll come to in a minute. So, the rest of the older tracks, including on the album, though, were much more specifically copies of particular tracks, and we'll hear one of them later. So once the Spot the Difference project was given the green light by the band, the elements of Squeeze's signature sound discussed above led to various complexities in the reconstruction process. Due to the ownership of the original masters now being out of the band's hands, plenty of musical archaeology needed to be carried out through listening to the singles and albums, looking at early footage of photos of performances and studio work to decide what resources were needed. It was decided that CDs had to be used as source tracks, which meant that they were already dealing with slightly different mixes and mastering from the original versions, apart from those of Some Fantastic Place, which was originally used as a CD. The source track was chosen pragmatically according to what offered the most clarity on the sounds that we used. So it wasn't necessarily the best version, the best mix, it was the one which helped them the most to do the project. And this then became the guide track that re-recording was made to. For the re-recording itself, most obviously, it was crucial to get hold of or recreate the sound of the original instruments used in order to get those particular combinations Squeeze uses spot on. In some cases, this proved a real challenge, particularly in the case of the drums and the electronic or keyboard instruments. So the drums for the early tracks were originally performed on an Octopus kit, which is no longer available, but was recreated here through the hire of 8 concert toms. So an Octopus has got 8 toms in a ring, hence the name. Tilbrook still had his Roland CR68 used on the original recordings, so that was useful. Various keyboards were required, some of which are also no longer available. They managed to get hold of Polymoog. They hired it, but it turned out not to work. Apparently they were generally very unreliable back in the day anyway. And they also needed a marimba and a minimoog for some tracks. So the lack of the Polymoog and some uncertainty over what voices were originally used of these keyboard instruments meant they had to attempt to recreate the distinctive sounds of these keyboards through guesswork. Jones was responsible for matching these keyboard sounds in the mixing stage, and he told us that this was one of the hardest parts of the project. The use of electronic effects in the original tracks also led to some guesswork, with Jones using modern digital methods to try to recreate the sound of what he thought had been done using different means in the past. Tilbrook was helpful on this front. He knew, for example, they always use a 30 millisecond delay to thicken the sound, for example, and he also knew what they hadn't done, but he didn't know exactly what they had done always. So even when they knew what had happened, without the original recording equipment, new ways of reaching the required effects had to be used. The recording process was to create an artificial click track at the start of whichever original CD track they were using as a reference, then to record each instrumental part individually using the CD as a guide track. It was not always clear whether the sounds of the instruments were right until the mixing stage, when small shifts in balance could have a huge impact on the overall sound of the track. Jones told us that getting the different instruments to sit right in the mix in the same way as they had in the original was the other hardest aspect of the project. At the end of the process, the whole track was mixed and then compared with the guide track by playing the two simultaneously and jumping back and forth between them, tweaking the balance and placement and panning the parts until they matched as closely as possible. And if you play with the tracks like that, some of them are extremely close, some of them less so. So moving on to how we in Pumroo did our Spot the Difference work. So it took us a while to arrange interviews with people involved in the project. So when the project started, I didn't know any of the details I've just shared at all. And my job was to undertake a reverse process of the musical archaeology that we later found out Jones had done, in order to guess which tracks formed the basis to Spot the Difference, and then compare them back with the remake. So first we tracked down every commercially released iteration of each track prior to Spot the Difference that we could listen to, focusing on covering all the formats that the tracks have migrated across from started vinyl, moved to tape, CD to remastered CD. This resulted in a collection of 188 tracks, which my research assistant Joe Turner has put into the computer, and we've been analysing them with Adobe Audition and also through listening ourselves. So we're still working on this data, we've got a huge quantity of data, and I'm running out of time today. But for now, I'm going to make a few comments on track length and panning, which length is easy to discuss in the stream, panning might be less successful, we'll see how we go. So in terms of length, at first I thought I'd just get in any recordings that looked like they were different lengths. I assumed that tracks that were identical lengths and compilations would be identical, but later on realised that because of each compilation and format needing particular mastering to match the rest of the compilation, this wouldn't necessarily be the case. Every new release is most likely a slightly different version of the master and will therefore have different slight characteristics. So there are various reasons for changes in the length of a track. So this is cool for cats. You can see there's a 30 seconds difference between the longest and shortest versions of the track. So the album version is the longest, at about 3 minutes 40 seconds. This is because it has an extended solo section and an extended outro. The album track was used as the original Cool for Cats on just 2 compilations, the Classics Volume 25 compilation in 1987 and the collection in 2008. The version of the single that appeared on the 45s and Under compilation has a slightly shorter outro section, so it's different again from the single version. And this version seems to have been replicated on all the other subsequent Greatest Hits releases. Other than that, Joe's told us that there's also time differences on Greatest Hits version to version because there's some play in the analog master, so every time a new CD is made, they detect different sound because the master plays differently on every type of equipment. There's also probably some deficiencies in our system. Our vinyls are consistently coming up as slower than the CDs. You can't really hear the difference, but there is usually a difference of about 6 seconds in length from vinyl to CD. So that's what I want to say about length. So as you can see though, the version of the Cool for Cats that has become the classic that is included on the Greatest Hits isn't even consistent in itself, so occasionally it's the album version, more often it's the single version. So the version of Cool for Cats that people know is not necessarily the same version that other people know. So moving on to panning, we'll try to work with Tempted. So with panning, we use the phase analysis function in Adobe Audition in conjunction with oral analysis, because the actual panning that the computer can see doesn't always match the perceived panning that you can hear in the headphones. We found that in general, the extreme panning that's a feature of the suite of Spot the Difference is always included in every version of the track, but it tends to expand and contract in width from version to version over time. So I'm going to first show you how panning is used to mark sections in Tempted, and then I'm going to show you how this has varied over time in different versions visually. So Tempted opens with a lone tom here, which is hard right in your speakers. So it's easy to hear. It stays there throughout the song. It's not used very often. It's used as a consistent sectional marker at moments of increased energy or change in section until there's 2 when something else happens. So I've drawn rough sound boxes. I'm sure you've all seen these before, just in case you haven't. This is the front. So the voice at the front, bass and bass drum are over to the left slightly. There's an organ filling the midsection. The low tom sticks out over here. There's a piano at the back, and the rest of the kits are there. So again, I've no idea if you can hear this. You can enjoy my pretty pictures if you can't. So the tom is the first thing you'll hear, but there's another chance to hear it. I'll call you when it comes again. That's it. So that tom is always there. Right, hard right. I'm also having to do this backwards from having to do my headphones on. Quite performance of being here. Right, okay, so at the beginning of the second verse, the tom disappears, and instead we get it's replaced with panning interest in the voices instead. So there are 3 voices introduced in this verse, which move across the box. So I'll point to where they are on the screen at the right moment.
The airport, the baggage carousel.
the second verse to introduce the different voices as well, which in the original were Elvis Costello and friends, so that's all very exciting. So, by the time we get to the opening chorus 2, the low tone is still there, but is now masked by an organ swell and this kind of bubbling sound. I can't describe it any better, but so the tone is still there, but it's now masked by an organ bubble which pans across from left to right, and again partway through, effectively taking the tone's place. So I'm not as good at demonstrating this. Let's see what I can do. Okay, so in the final chorus, the exciting bit, the tom comes back. We have the tom back again, here he is. Back to prominence, and the organ is more muted. And then in the very final outro section, the organ bubble and the tom are heard magnificently together, and we now have drum fills which move across the space, with the highest toms now on the right, middle toms in the middle, and lowest toms in the back, which is backwards from any drum kit I've ever played, but it still sounds cool in the panning space. So, this bit you can hear the tom throughout totally. That's how Tempted to use panning. So we've taken pictures of it with Adobe Audition. So this is a phase analysis chart. I don't know how many of you have seen these before. So there's the midline here. That's centre. This is right and left. And this is telling you how far the panning move is going across at any particular point, which side is emphasised, yes, because the mix at any particular point. So this is a comparison of the 7-inch single with the vinyl LP. So you can see the single is narrower, and the single is a different track in Tempted. Wait a minute. It's definitely a different track in Tempted. The album cut has a longer fade out than the single version, so it might be a different take or it might just be a different mix, but they're definitely different. So you can hear the album version. You can see here the album version is slightly wider, and then the cassette album is wider again. The CD album is really wide. It pans the tom miles over here. Then if you move into the greatest hits compilations, we go back to the Classics Volume 25 is based on the album, so that's wide. Singles Push Back and Under is a single, so it's narrow again. Most of the greatest hits are wide. The Master Series CD compilation is backwards, so they print it backwards, which is really bizarre. But it's that matches the East Side Story remaster. That one, 1998. So it's obviously taken the mirror image of that one, because with the same recording exactly, I think. They own the same rights. Piccadilly collection goes smaller again. Big Squeeze is smaller. Gold is all of these rules using singles, and then Spot the Difference. We go back to really wide panning again. And I have photos of this throughout Tempted and various other tracks. So, the widest version was the East Side Story remastered CD, which James told us was the guide track to Spot the Difference. It's not surprising that that's the same. Also, the remastered CDs, Glenn Tilbrook was involved in the making of, so it may be that he decided to make the panning more extreme in that version than he'd been able to in the original versions. The other greatest hits are based on the single track, as I've just shown you. So I could go on and on, but instead I'll move swiftly on to my conclusion. So, trying to spot the difference in a given track over time turned out to be remarkably complicated. The collection of tracks that form the basis to spot the difference have all appeared multiple times across different formats since their first release. And with every re-release, the particular frequencies of that original captured recording are altered slightly according to the format and the other songs that it appears with. This raises the question what the original work is that the Spot Difference is trying to replicate, and has highlighted to me that consumers of old pop music do not ever hear the original re-recorded masterful work, at least not of older recordings made prior to the digital era. Instead, we usually focus on one instance of what could be called a proliferating work. As all the versions of recordings are at least slightly different, people who study pop music would perhaps do well to specify which version they are taking to be the work of study, particularly if the track has had a long life. Studying Spot the Difference has also highlighted how much recording sounds can date, both in terms of the original technology used and the formats they're released on, and that it's really impossible to replicate them exactly. So at this point, have we got time, Sarah, to play a couple of examples? Or do you think maybe it would take 2 seconds to play the examples? We're about 3 minutes from the end after I play these. So, knowing what we now know about how they made it, this is Cool for Cats. I'm going to have another vote of which is the original.
From the rocks above the past, the camels take position in the bushes and the grass. The stories of the cooking cheese.
That's one.
The Indians send signals from the rocks above the pass. The cowboys take position in the bushes and the grass. The stories of the cooking cheese.
Okay, so who thinks version 1 is the original? Who thinks version 2 is the original? Yes, you all got very good ears. Yes, that was actually the Essential Squeeze version, which is the one they use as a guide track. So it's not the original at all, but it is not the Spot the Difference version either. Yeah, I think the problem with Spot the Difference is the temporal aspects of the recording are just so difficult to get right, basically. So listening to Spot the Difference, I found the main difference with the original tracks were temporal. So different instruments don't quite sit the same way in the mix in the Spot the Difference versions, and the individual instrumental sounds are just not always quite right. So in Cool for Cats, that squelch on the bass, they just haven't got it quite right there, which is because they don't know how they did it the first time, so they've had to do it a different way the second time. I did ask him specifically about Cool for Cats, he said it was very hard. When I say he, I mean Andy Jones. So, if compared directly, although every effort has been made to replicate unusual sounds and distinctive production techniques, the original tracks sound more organic somehow, more as if they are all apart and Spot the Difference. Perhaps this is the fundamental problem with attempting a painstaking reconstruction. You're trying to turn the serendipitous happenings of the original recording process, which in the case of early squeeze was often done quite quickly on the fly with whatever was available to them, into a fixed foundational text, and then recreating it moment by moment. So in conclusion of my section, then, while the songs themselves can be replicated, the distinctive sounds of Squeeze's recordings themselves tend to elude exact reproduction. I'm going to hand over to Jennifer for just a couple of comments on the subject later on.
Okay, so thank you for your patience. Just 2 minutes as a final round-off there. I've just got 4 points that I just want to finish with. So, starting with methodology, the process that we've undertaken here has combined detailed music analysis, the piecing together of detailed song life stories, tracing recording and publishing rights, face-to-face interviews with Difford and co-producer Andy Jones, ethnographic research and forensic, if I dare use the term, forensic audio and production analysis to actually spot the differences between the different versions of songs across multiple compilations. This has felt rather like an archaeological excavation for us, digging through the layers, but finding these sort of newer interjections which cut through the different levels. Secondly, the process has highlighted the importance of acknowledging a song's life story by looking beyond just the song title and visiting a song in its multiple iterations. We're able to be very specific about which versions we're discussing and analysing, or even perhaps using in cases of music plagiarism. In classical music, there's often lengthy programme notes explaining key events in the life story of the piece to be played. So we wondered, why wouldn't we use the same vigorous approach when discussing popular music? Doing so potentially enables us to see how multiple external factors, such as those we've seen like changes in technology, commercial exploitation, cover versions, performance conventions, remasters, re-releases, and so on, might individually or collectively impact the nature of a musical work at any given point in time. Third, our work on Spot the Difference has affirmed that the relationship between music and copyright, musical work and copyright, is indeed an extremely slippery thing. And finally, whilst it's interesting enough to track a particular squeeze song across all of its appearances on various compilations, We believe that listening to Difford and Tilbrook's attempt at reproducing their own historic material on Spot the Difference offers incredibly fertile ground for discussion and a really unusual perspective. It's a fascinatingly strange album and an odd idea to do an exact re-recording, but its peculiarity is such, we believe, that it invites us to reflect on the concept of originality and the very nature of the musical work itself. Thank you.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.